Okay, so the last day we saw linear regression and how it works. I also told you about the least squares method, how we optimize the equation of the line. And somebody, I guess Ritodeep asked that what can be the minimum loss value. I had said that it would be 0 because that is the best fit. But the thing is that it won't be 0 since first of all we are adding a bias to the line. So obviously you cannot have a line that will pass through all the points, and whenever you don't have a line that can pass through all the points, then there will be an error, because obviously the value of y as predicted from the equation of the line will be different from the actual ground truth y value, right? So I had been wrong there, that what can be the minimum value of the line, the minimum of the loss function. And secondly, if you want to calculate the minimum value that can be got from the loss function, then first of all you need to calculate what will be the best fit line, right? And for that I can show you if you want, or I can just give you an idea about how it happens, how you can calculate that. And it can be calculated mathematically. You don't need a machine learning algorithm for that. So it goes as, say you have loss function is equals to summation of yi minus yi hat whole square. So we are subtracting the prediction from the ground truth and we are squaring it. And what we need to do then is that, since we are having a line, say yi equal to mxi plus ci, mxi plus c, m and c are what we need to find. That is the that is a slope. M is a slope and c is the y intersect. So those two are the variables, and then you need to put this value yi equal to mxi plus c into the loss function equation. So you'll have summation yi caps minus minus mxi plus c. So that is inside the brackets, and then whole square. And now what you need to do is to get two equations. How will you get two equations? Since you have two variables, m and c, what we can do is that we can differentiate the same equation two times with respect to m and with c. As you know, since differentiating will give us 0, because we are going to find the best fit curve, that is okay. This will be told by Shahnaz that that will be a global minima. So at the minima we will have 0 after differentiating the function. So this is how you can actually find the value of m and c and find the best fit curve. My point of showing this the other day was not to show that machines can also compute this differentiation, but to give you an idea how it works, how the things work out, and then we'll apply it to other complex problems, just like the Boston dataset I showed you the other day. So that was just a basic example and how it is working. I hope it is clear. And this is all I had to say about that loss function thing that I had missed out the other day.
Yeah, if anybody is having anything to ask, then please ask.
Yeah.
Else we'll be beginning with the second part, which is the gradient descent. That is the schedule for today.
Any questions regarding that? Ridhdeep, did you understand what I said since you had asked the question?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay, then we can continue with what is planned today.
Yeah, okay, sure. So let me just share my screen, just a second. Yeah, is it visible?
Hello, visible.
Okay, how many slides are currently showing? One or two?
Two.
2 slides.
Okay, okay. So this is visible. Okay. Yeah. Just going from here only.
ওইখানে তরকারি টরকারি কাটার কোনো কিছু নেই। দিদি পারবে।
Yes, the previous session what we saw was how to do linear regression. Actually, what is linear regression? So today we'll see that how does actually linear. Who is this? Please mute yourself. Some noise is coming from the background. All right. So what does a linear model actually do? So when we saw a linear model actually makes a prediction by simply computing a weighted sum of the input features, plus it also considers a bias term, which is known as the also known as the intercept term. So here you can see, is this visible? This equation thing and something written below?
Yeah.
All right. So here we can see that there is an expression named y hat. We actually call this y hat. And here we have taken theta naught plus theta 1 x1 plus theta 2 x2 plus continued to theta n xn. So what is this? This is basically a weighted sum of some thetas and some x. So this y hat is actually the predicted value, which we actually call the prediction. Okay, and these things, the theta naught, theta 1, theta 2 continued to theta n, these are actually the features of the model. I mean the features which the model actually learns. Okay, and n is the total number of features that the model needs to learn. And here x1, x2, x3 continued to xn, these are all the feature values. Okay, so here actually these theta 1, theta naught, theta 1, theta 2, these are actually also called the model parameters. And the first term which you can see, that the theta naught, it is actually also called the bias term, means it is a constant which is also added to the weighted sum. It is also called as a Gaussian noise, you can say. And if you sum all of it, then you get the actual prediction. Now what do we need to do here? When we actually train a model, we actually need to find out those values of the theta, or those particular values of the theta at which the model performs the best, at which the loss is the minimum and the prediction is the best. So this you actually need to perform. So for that, when we find predictions, we actually use this equation. Now next we will see another form of this equation, which is also known as a vectorized form. You don't need to go much deeper into that. This one. So this is the MSE cost function for a linear regression model, which you actually saw. This is in some other expression, this theta terms only. So here it is C 1 by mi and then summation and some theta t, I mean theta transpose dot this x I ith x value minus y ith y value and whole square. So this is the mean square error function, which actually it is in a different form, nothing else. It's the same thing only. Now this is the vectorized form, you can say, or maybe the mean squared error. Next we will see what actually is. So here you can see another equation, which is the normal equation. Now I'll come into a few details. Okay, so we saw the linear regression model, and now we want to know how to train it. So recall that training a model means setting its parameters. I'll just go into that slide. These parameters, theta naught, theta 1 continue to theta n, setting those parameters so that the model best fits the training set. For this purpose, we first need a measure of how well or how poorly the model fits the training data initially. Okay, and the most common performance measure which of a regression model is the root mean square error, RMSE. Now, therefore, to train a linear regression model, you need to find the value of theta that minimizes the RMSE, actually the root mean square error. And here, in practice, what we do is that instead of computing the RMSE, we actually minimize the MSE. Mostly we do this because calculating the MSE is much easier than calculating the RMSE, which is the root mean square error. Now, when we see this is the MSE expression. Basically, this we actually minimize when we train a model. Now, next we saw another equation known as this normal equation. Now, to find the value of theta, to set the model parameters that minimizes the cost function, there are basically two types of solutions. The first one is known as the normal equation, using which this is also known as the closed form solution, you can say. So using this, we actually can get the set of theta values directly without doing any iterations, without going through any steps. We just put the values as given into this equation, and it would give me the set of theta values for which the model would perform the best. Here you can see again the theta hat. So the theta hat is that value of theta which minimizes the cost function, and the y. So here you can see some are bold letters. So these bold letters are basically vectors, you can say. So here the y vector is the vector of the target values, means the classes actually. Say for example, you are classifying something, say a particle, say an object is a toy, something is a horse, something is a cat, something is a cow. So all of these things you are actually classifying. Say you are building an image classifier. So these cow, hat, toy, horse, all these things are actually the y values. The vector, I mean the target values, or the vector of the target values, you can say. It is actually the list of those classes into which you have to segregate the data the model is given. All right. So next, this is one form in which you can calculate the values of theta, which is required by the model, or you can find out the model's parameters. Now, next we will see an example. So here is a linear regression model, and the predictions using this normal equation. So the first, this diagram which you can see on the left is actually a data set which is generated. So it is actually an equation which is plotted, and the data points are actually in that pattern of an equation. The equation which we have taken here is 3x plus 4 plus some constant. So this is the equation following which the data points are plotted here. And in the diagram on the right side, you can see there is another line which is done after fitting this to the normal equation. So the normal, when we perform this, actually there is a calculation you can do, and based on that you can find this equation or the predicted values. For every individual x, the normal equation returns a predicted value. So from that model parameters which you actually found from the normal equation, you are predicting some values, say some y values for every x in the interval 0 to 2, which gives you this line. So see, the normal equation gave you this line in a single iteration. You just feed it the values which are required to be trained on, and it actually gives you the model parameters which would give the best predictions. So this red line actually fit this whole data set here. And I mean the red line is the predictions. Now going on, we can see that what actually happens with this normal equation. Now another thing I like to mention, that this thing you can perform in normal Python also. I mean using some mathematical operations. Also there is another thing in sklearn which is known as the linear regression. Using that you can also do this. It would take only 3 or 4 lines to do, and it will give you the same thing. You can implement this normal equation thing using sklearn also. So this was the first way in which we can find the model parameters which would I mean develop the best model in this use case. All right. Okay, so this thing is normal equation. So now you may wonder that why, since the normal equation is already here, so why are the other things, like the other methods are also there? We iterate on many steps and we build the model. Why does model building take so much time? Because we already have an equation. So why would it take so much time? Why would different organizations like Google, IBM, all these things who are investing so much into AI, so much computational power, and why are these things taking so much time? If it only was to be found in a single step, then what is the use of all this time which people are investing? So every thing comes with its limitations, which actually helps to bring in further things. So actually normal equation also has some set of limitations also, due to which the prevalent methods have actually come across. So what happens to this normal equation is that the normal equation computes, when you go back to the equation, you can see here. See here, the normal equation computes the inverse of x vector, or the x vector transpose dot x. Again, we do a dot product of the transpose of x and the vector itself, and we do the inverse of whole. And again, we do some dot product with its transpose, and we do some dot product with the vector of the y values. So here you can see that it is an n into n matrix where n is the number of features. So this x transpose dot x is actually an n into n matrix where n is the number of features. Now, another thing which you may have learned in the initial sessions of the DSA thing was something called as computational complexity, which means that if your input grows according to some pattern, say if your input grows linearly, how much would your, I mean, how would your performance of the thing you are building would be affected? Say for example, how much space would it consume and how much time would it take, or how much time for the computation would increase in what pattern. So that is known as the computational complexity, analyzing those things. So what happened in normal equation was, in the first expression, which consisted of that n by n matrix, the computational complexity of inverting such a matrix is typically about, we say it, order of n cube. It is a technical term you would learn later on maybe, but which means that, in simple words, it means that if we double the number of features, then we multiply the computation time by roughly 2 cube, which means n cube, or order of n cube. So if you double the number of features, the computation time will be increased by 8 times. So this normal equation actually gets this limitation, that if the normal equation is provided with a number of features, say for example, in real life, we are actually dealing with millions and millions of features. So for example, say we feed it 1 lakh features. So the normal equation actually gets very slow when the number of features are growing. So since normal equation has this limitation, it also has some few advantages also. So on the positive side, this equation is linear with regards to the number of instances in the training set. So it handles large training sets efficiently, provided they can fit into the memory. Also, once you have trained your linear regression model using the normal equation or any other algorithm, predictions are very fast in this normal equation thing. The computational complexity may be huge, but this happens only during the training of the model. Once the model is trained using this normal equation, you can build, or you can find the predictions in a very fast manner. So the computational complexity is linear with regards to both the number of instances you want to make predictions on and the number of features. This is only the prediction thing, not the training thing. The training thing takes a lot of time. In other words, you may say that making predictions on twice as many instances will take roughly about twice as much time. So it scales linearly. Now we'll look at various different ways in which we can train a linear regression model, which are better suited for those cases where there are a large number of features. I mean, the training set has a large number of features. Say for example, what are features basically? So the features is, say for example, you are feeding your model with say 10,000 images of horses. To build a horse classifier, you will feed it any image and it will say it is a horse or not. So what are the characteristics the horse actually has? It may have some pattern of its eye, it may have some pattern of its fur, it may have some pattern of its ear, and the body shape, the shape of the legs, all these are the features. So these are the features of the data which you are giving it, the data which you are giving to the model. So this is what I was referring to as the number of features. So as these number of features are increasing, now when you want to build a good model, you actually have to define a very large number of features to make it accurate enough. But that number of features should also be constrained. I mean, it should not be that very huge. You're going on multiplying the features by, say, millions and millions of features. So that would also result in something not very beneficial to the use case you are applying. So there actually gradient descent comes, that when you are handling a lot of features, another thing comes that is gradient descent. So one was that normal equation. You are basically two ways of finding the model parameters. One was the normal equation, which you can in which you can get the model parameters directly in one shot. This was this. Now the second thing which comes, which is prevalent nowadays, is the gradient descent. So yeah, so gradient descent is a very generic optimization of algorithm capable of finding optimal solutions to a wide range of problems. The general idea of gradient descent is to tweak parameters iteratively in order to minimize some cost function, which is RMSE, or you may say MSE here. So now suppose, let us take a situation. Say you are lost in the mountains or in a dense fog, and you can only feel the slope of the ground below your feet. Now a good strategy to get to the, say you are at the top of the mountain, you need to get to the bottom of a valley quickly. Now what does quickly mean here? That you want to, at every step which you take, you want to take the step which is the most steep downwards. Now this is what actually gradient descent does. it measures the local gradient of the error function with regards to the parameter vector theta, and it goes in the direction of the descending gradient. It would find, actually in simple words, it would find in which direction the curve is more steep, and it will choose that path to go down. So once the gradient descent is zero, I mean, when you have found a place where when you are looking around, all the places are at a higher level than the place you are standing at. So that part is known as the global minimum, or you may say it is a minimum basically, not a global minimum every time. Now we'll see how this happens here. Say, okay, so in this picture, see on the left, the top purple color, which bubble you can see at the top, that is the place you are starting at. So which is at a random initial value. So from there, you are taking very little steps. You start by filling, at first you start filling theta, I mean the model parameters with some random values. Now this is also called random initialization. Then you improve it gradually, taking one small step at a time, each step attempting to decrease the cost function. That is the MSE here, until the algorithm converges to a minimum, which you can see is at the base of this curve. So an important parameter in gradient descent is the size of the steps determined by the learning rate hyperparameter. So it means that how much long step will you take at each time? It is a very important factor here. See, the steps here are going on decreasing at every step. So this is known as the learning rate. So learning rate means the rate at which your model is actually learning. If the learning rate is too small, say what is the length of the step you are taking? Say for example, if I say in a scenario, say a baby is learning to walk, so it would take small steps. Say for example, small steps of say a few centimeters or something. But when some grown-up people walk, they usually take steps in some foots or something. So these things is actually affects the model also, that it depends very importantly on the learning step. So you need to be careful about that, what exactly the learning step you need to set, so that your model finds the global minimum or finds the best model parameters in the most optimal time. So if the learning rate is too small, then the algorithm will have to go through many iterations to converge, which will in turn take a long time. So we'll see next this. See, this is the learning rate where it is too small. So if the learning rate is too small, the number of iterations would increase. On the other hand, and the next thing we'll see, if the learning rate is too large, you might actually jump across the valley and end up on the other side, possibly even higher than you were before. Now this might make the algorithm diverge with larger and larger values, failing to find a good solution. Say for example, the first step you are taking from this bubble over here to this bubble. So this is a large step. Then again you are computing the gradient here. You see you are coming here, then again here, then here, maybe here, and these things. So here each step is actually very large compared to what was in the previous case, that it was very small. So you have to find an optimal learning rate. So finally, not all cost functions look like these things. See this curve over here, which is looking like a parabola, something quadratic equation kind of thing. So this is actually the cost functions curve. So this is a very ideal situation. Not all cost functions will look like these nice regular bowls. There may be holes, there may be ridges, there may be plateaus, and all sorts of irregular terrains, making convergence to the minimum, I mean that bottom of the bowl, very difficult. So the various types of challenges may come here when you are dealing with gradient descent. Say for example, if the, I'll just show you that thing, this thing, see. So here there are two types of cases. In the left, see this graph. See this graph, the left part, there is a local minimum. In the right part, see, there is a very elongated flattened portion, which is known as the plateau portion. And this is the global minimum of the whole curve. Okay, so for example, here, say if the random initialization starts the algorithm on the left, then it will converge to the local minimum here, which is not as good as the global minimum. When you are traveling from here, the left side, this purple dot over here, you are coming down, down. And when you have reached here, at this point, when you are calculating the gradients again, you will feel that at all the sides, the slope is a bit higher than before. So you would be in this illusion that you have already reached the global minimum and it would stop. But it is actually not the case. The global minimum for reaching the global minimum, you actually have to travel a lot more distance. You have to come here, here, till you reach here. But see, the model is in an illusion that it has already reached a global local minimum. So it is not very good. On the other hand, see the different case. See the thing on the right. If you start at the right, see this rightmost purple bubble here. Then if you take small steps and you go towards this, see the slope is decreasing very slowly here. So when you are calculating the gradient at every step, you will feel that it is taking a very long time to cross the plateau. And if you stop too early, you will never reach the global minimum. Okay, so these are the pitfalls which may happen in gradient descent. Now the MSE cost function, fortunately, which we are using, this MSE cost function happens to be a convex function. So what does the convex function basically mean? It means that if you pick any 2 points on the curve, the line segment joining them will never cross the curve. This is what a convex function is. So this implies that in this MSE function which we have taken, there are no local minimum. Since this is a convex function, there are no local minimum. There is just one global minimum. So it is also a continuous function with a slope that never changes abruptly, like this curve. This is not at all looking like a MSE cost function. But we have taken MSE cost function. Why? Because it is a convex function. There are no local minima. There is just one global minimum. And it is also a continuous function with a slope that never changes abruptly. So these two facts have a great consequence. Gradient descent is guaranteed to approach arbitrarily close to the global minimum. Why I'm saying arbitrarily, I'll come to it later on. If you wait long enough, and if the learning rate is not too high, if you set these two hyperparameters, an optimum value, the learning rate and the time through which it would traverse, I mean the number of iterations, then it would obviously reach the global minimum, even close to the global minimum, not the global minimum. Now we'll see another thing what happens here. Yeah, so here are two diagrams. On the left, which you can see a perfect circle kind of, and on the right you can see a kind of a oval kind of thing. So the cost function has the shape of a bowl, but it can be an elongated type of bowl. See it on the right side if the features have very different scales. All right, so when you are training, when your model is training on a training set, where you may say the features, say for example, feature 1 and feature 2 have the same scale. Same scale means here that, for example, say you have done in map pointing or something in your 10th or those classes, that when you are scaling, say for example, 10 kilometers on the ground represents 1 kilometer, 1 centimeter on the map. And in another map you are taking that 20 kilometers on the ground equals to 2 centimeters on the 1 centimeter on the map. So these things, see these two scales are actually different. So when you are training a model, when you are training a model using gradient descent actually, so there, if your features are not properly scaled, as in the right diagram, the left diagram, you may meet with some errors or maybe some pitfalls which are not expected. Whereas on the right side, see the two features. For example, take here two features. One is theta1, another is theta2. These two features have actually different scales. What happens here is, I'll give you an example. On the left, the gradient descent algorithm goes straight towards the minimum. You can see a straight line is there after traversing through different dots. So it is reaching the straight towards the minimum, and it is reaching there quickly since it goes through a straight line. Whereas on the right side, it first goes in a direction almost orthogonal to the direction of the global minimum. See, it is going perpendicular to the direction in which it needs to go. And it ends with a long march. See, it is going a longer path basically than the diagram on the left. And then it reaches an almost flat valley. So it will eventually reach the minimum, no doubt in that, but it will take a long time. That is why feature scaling is important. I mean, all the features should be in the same scale for gradient descent to perform. So for using this feature scaling, there is a library from the scikit-learn, which is known as the standard scalar, or you must say the standard scalar class. So which actually scales all your features. So we'll look into that later on when we are doing this hands-on. So that is a required thing before performing gradient descent. Now, one thing we have to note here is that we have discussed about gradient descent. So there are various types of gradient descent again. Now, the diagram here represents another thing. it also illustrates the fact that training a model means searching for a combination of model parameters that would minimize the cost function over the training set. Now it is a search in the model's parameter space. Basically, the more parameters a model has, the more dimensions this space has. For example, you may say in a room full of, say, rice grains, you are searching for a needle. So the number of rice grains is the number of features, and the needle which you are looking for is actually at the global minimum. So as the number of features is increasing, as the training set is increasing, so the time would also increase. Now, fortunately, here we found a cost function which is convex in case of linear regression. So we know that the needle would be simply at the bottom of the room, or maybe if the room is a circular curved at the bottom, it would be at the bottom, which is the global minimum. So now we go into the different types of gradient descent. Gradient descent has its different types, and which again has its own advantages, disadvantages. So this may look a bit boring because it may be a bit theoretical, but these are the core things which you need to know when building models, and these are the things which will actually perform. I mean, you need to focus on these small things which actually make changes when you are building a large model. You may be finding some good optimal solution using very simple algorithms instead of going for those complicated algorithms which mostly people use today. So the first type of gradient descent which is happening here is the batch gradient. So to implement gradient descent, we need to compute the gradient of the cost function with regards to each model parameter. In other words, you need to calculate how much the cost function will change if you change that model parameter, say for example theta I or theta j, and just a little bit. So this is called a partial derivative. That is like asking what is the slope of the mountain under your feet if you face a particular direction. Then asking the same question again when you are facing in some other direction. So you are basically assuming, or maybe you are basically looking for some values. Say you are looking in a particular direction, you feel there is a slope there, you calculate the slope there, and you see, okay, say that value be x1. Now you move in some other direction, you again calculate the slope there, see the value comes there x2. So you are changing the model parameters a through small steps, and you are calculating how is this cost function actually changing. I mean, the value of the cost function is changing. So this is called this partial derivative. Now you will see an equation. You don't need to go much deeper into that for now. Just know about the notations. So this is the partial derivative of the cost function, that MSE thing which we actually saw earlier. I guess this thing, yeah, this thing. This was the actual equation, and the expression on the left side is actually the partial derivative of the cost function. Excuse me. Yeah. So here we are seeing that the partial derivative of the cost function with respect to the parameter theta, which is here is theta j. So we take a particular parameter, we find the partial derivative of the cost function with respect to that particular parameter. Now this may look a bit hectic. So we actually have another form which is known as the gradient form, which actually consists of one single column vector of all those partial derivatives of each individual, I mean partial derivatives with respect to each individual model parameter. This is also known as the gradient vector of the cost function. So not going into too much deep, we'll see another thing, which is the gradient descent step. So the thing which I was saying previously, how we decide that how much distance we will actually travel on each step. So to decide that step, there is an equation, say theta minus, here is another expression known as eta, that thing, eta into this gradient vector of the cost function. So what does these things mean here? So the theta, you actually know what is theta. Say once you have the gradient vector, this theta thing is actually the model parameter. So when you are subtracting this gradient vector from the theta, here another thing comes into play, which is known as the eta. Eta is also known as the learning rate, the rate at which the model is learning. So when we are learning about batch gradient descent, what happens is the formula involves, say, this gradient vector on the right side. This formula involves every individual instance in the training set. Or in other words, we can say that this formula involves calculations over the full training set at each gradient descent step. At each step, we actually have to calculate the gradient over all the instances I have in my training set. This is why this algorithm is known as the batch gradient descent. It uses the whole batch of training data at every step. As a result, it is terribly slow on very large training sets, but we'll see different other gradient descent algorithms also, which are actually more beneficial than this. But in this batch gradient descent, what happens that, however, gradient descent scales well with the number of features. Now, here we are seeing the batch gradient descent, which means that in every step, we are calculating the gradients over the full training set. Now, when we are actually dealing with many features, then normal equation becomes a limitation, and then we take up this gradient descent thing. So here, the first thing we saw is this batch gradient descent, where we deal with the entire data set at every iteration. Every iteration means every path. And here we are actually also seeing another parameter, which is known as this eta. Eta is the learning rate. I mean, the rate at which the model should learn this thing, theta minus eta into this gradient vector, this thing. Now we'll see how important is this theta parameter. So here you are seeing three diagrams. On the left, the learning rate is too low. And on the middle, the learning rate looks pretty good. But on the right, the learning rate is too high. So when in the middle thing, so how I am judging that it is too good? Because in just a few iterations, it has already converged to the solution. Whereas on the right, the learning rate is too high. The algorithm diverges, jumping all over the place and actually getting further and further away from the solution. See, you had actually, we had to do that, fit this whole data set with a line. But the whole thing which is happening is these these lines are actually jumping over this, and it is going on gradient. It is calculating the gradient and it is descending in a different direction totally. So we cannot afford this. Whereas also this on the left side, we also cannot afford this. So this learning parameter, say in the first case, we have decided to keep a learning parameter eta of 0.02, in the middle one 0.1, and in the right side 0.5. So here what comes out is that 0.1 is the most optimized learning parameter which we should use while training our model. Now in the left side, you may be wondering what this code is. It is nothing, but it is actually the thing which I saw you earlier, that gradient descent step. So it is a naive implementation of that thing. We are dealing with that thing where for every iteration, we are calculating the gradients and we are descending. So see, we have found out a set of model parameters. Now I'd like to take a reference from a thing. The initial one thing which I saw you showed you was this thing. Yeah. So this thing was based on this normal equation, and this was actually asked to fit that thing 4x plus 3 plus some constant. This was the equation. So using the normal equation, we found some parameters using the normal equations. The parameters were 4.21 something and 2.77 something, whereas the thing we actually used was 4x plus 3. So it was, for the ideal situation, it would have come 4 and 3. But using normal equations, we are reaching quite close, which is 4.21 something and 2.77. So it is quite close, but still not the best. And here again, when we are seeing this thing using the gradient descent, we are again finding out that these parameters are coming 4.21509 something and 2.77, which is exactly the same. Now this was using naive gradient descent, which is the batch gradient descent. And on the right side, we have seen different learning rates with gradient descent. Now you may wonder, now another thing, you may wonder that what is a good learning rate? How do we decide what value we need to set for this eta? So for this, there is another thing which is known as the grid search. So grid search we'll look into later on. So using grid search, we can find that what is the most optimum good learning rate. However, you may want to limit the number of iterations so that grid search can eliminate models that take too long to converge, basically. So you can also limit limit the number of iterations through which the model would go on before it is reaching the global minimum, or before it is reaching the most optimized solution. Now you are also considering about what are the number of iterations here. What is the iterations I'm talking about? What is the number of steps, basically? How many steps the model needs to take? So if you are taking a low number of steps, then to find an optimal solution, uh, it may take too long. I mean, the algorithm would maybe never stop, or it may be stopping after a very long time. Whereas if you take the number of iterations very high, or too high number of iterations, then you will waste time while the model parameters do not change anymore. Now, a simple solution is to set a very large number of iterations, but to interrupt the algorithm when the gradient vector becomes lower than a specified amount, lower than a threshold. So that is known as, that threshold is known as the tolerance. So when we are stopping the model, because we have reached what threshold we actually needed to reach. So we had stopped that gradient descent at that step. Actually, we have reached the minimum. So this was all about batch gradient descent. We are actually considering the whole data set at every step. Now we'll see another thing, which is known as the stochastic gradient descent, which is also known as in short SGD. This is another type of gradient descent. In the previous thing, the main problem with batch gradient descent is the fact that it uses the whole training set to compute the gradients at every step, which makes it very slow when the training set is large. Now at the opposite extreme, this SGD or the stochastic gradient descent comes, where what you do is you just pick up a random instance in the training set at every step and then compute the gradients based on only that single instance. Now, obviously, this makes the algorithm much faster since it has very little data to manipulate at every iteration. Also, it makes it possible to train on huge training sets. Now, why are we able to tackle these huge training sets in this SGD? Because the instance basically picks up one random instance. What it would do, it would just simply pick up one random instance. It would have to play with that single instance only. It would have to load that instance in memory, and it would have to iterate on that. Whereas in what happened in batch gradient descent, what it had to pick up the whole training set, it had to play with the whole training set. So there is a lot of overhead in that, which is overcome here in stochastic gradient descent. So another thing which would happen here is that, on the other hand, due to its stochastic or maybe the random nature, this algorithm is much less regular than the batch gradient descent. Instead of gently decreasing, it actually reaches the minimum. The cost function will actually very randomly, it will bounce up and down. I'll just show you a picture. This thing. See the learning rate, you can see the learning steps, you can see it is very, very random in a zigzag manner. Why does it happen? Because of its random nature. Basically, at every step it is picking up a random instance from the training set, and it is optimizing based on that instance. How is that instance performing on the cost function? It is optimizing based on that. So this algorithm is much less regular, you can say, than the batch gradient descent. Since in the batch gradient descent you had already saw, I'll take just that reference. This, see, the learning rate or the learning path, you may say, is very much smooth or very much regular, you may say. Whereas here, this thing, say, it is very a zigzag kind of thing. So here what we need to do is that every time it will end up very close to the minimum, but once it gets there, it will continue to bounce around. It will never settle down. So once the algorithm stops, the final parameters which you have got are good but not optimal, since it would continuously jump around. See, when it is reaching the center of the circle, it is again jumping around. It is not stopping, which did not happen in the batch gradient descent. So this thing is again beneficial, or maybe you can say it also has its own disadvantages. When the cost function is very irregular, this can actually help the algorithm. I mean, this stochastic gradient algorithm, it would help this to jump out of any local minima if it encounters, because it is random. Say, for example, you are reaching a local minima and it again jumps around. And consider a case where it jumps to the next step. I'll just show it, this thing. See, once it reaches here, it is again moving around. It is not stopping here. Say, for example, it gives a jump and it reaches here. So it would again descend and it will finally reach this global minimum. So this is the benefit which actually SGD has. Stochastic gradient descent has a better chance of finding the global minimum than the batch gradient descent. So it is having a better chance of finding the global minimum than the batch gradient descent does. So therefore, this randomness is actually good to escape from the local optima, but bad because it means that the algorithm can never settle at the minimum. This thing. So one solution to this dilemma is to actually gradually reduce the learning rate, that eta thing which we saw earlier. The steps which you are starting out, it should be large enough, then it would get smaller and smaller, allowing the algorithm to settle at the global minimum. This process, it actually has a term related to it, which is known as simulated annealing, because it actually resembles the process of annealing in metallurgy, which you have studied in your +2. So in the metallurgy, what happens is that the molten metal is slowly cooled down. The same thing happens here. The learning rate, you are slowly cooling it down. You initially start with a large learning rate, and you gradually, as you take steps, you decrease the learning rate. Now, the function that determines this learning rate at each iteration is known as the learning schedule. If the learning rate is reduced too quickly, you may get stuck in the local minimum, or even maybe you may end up frozen halfway to the minimum. So if the learning rate is reduced too slowly, again, it has its disadvantages. You may jump around the minimum for a long time and end up with a not so good, say a suboptimal solution if you halt the training too early. So these things happens. Uh, we'll come into the details later on, but before that, we'll see another thing. Where is that? Yeah. So the SGD, notice that since instances are picked randomly, some instances may be picked several times per iteration, while others may not be picked at all. Now, if we want to be sure that the algorithm goes through every instance at every epoch, another approach is there to shuffle the training set and then go through it instance by instance, and then again shuffle it, and so on. So this actually helps to converge more slowly. Now, how to implement SGD, this stochastic gradient descent? So in the left, you may see a code which is implemented using scikit-learn. First, we are importing that from scikit-learn.linear model. We are importing SGD regressor, and then we are using that. We are setting the number of iterations. We are setting a penalty. We are setting a ETA, which we will see later on. What is ETA? And then we are fitting that to the data set which we have. After that, when we are finding the parameters or the most optimized model parameters which this SGD model has reached, we will find that it is the first is 4.183 something, and the second one is the 2.74 something, which is quite close to the things we found in normal equation. But the actual things in the ideal situation which we feed it to this was, or the things you may say the data points which we actually plotted using the help of something which was 4x plus 3 plus some constant or some bias. So the ideal thing which would have come was 4 and 3, but here we are seeing that it is coming 4.183, and the second thing is 2 point something, which is quite close, and even better than what happened in the batch gradient descent. Now, another type of thing which we'll encounter after this is the last kind of thing, which is known as the mini batch gradient descent. Now, what happens again in this mini batch gradient descent is that it is quite simple to understand once you know batch and stochastic gradient descent. Basically, what happened in batch gradient descent was at every step it was dealing with the whole training set which you provided to that. And again, in the stochastic gradient descent, what happened is that it is picking up a random instance at every step, and after that it is calculating the different things on that random instance. Now again, in mini batch, what is happening is that instead of computing the gradients based on the full training set as in batch, or maybe on one instance as in SGD, the mini batch computes the gradients on small random sets of instances called mini batches. You divide the whole training set into some small groups, and you take up each group at each iteration, and you calculate the cost function. How is the gradient on each iteration based on that small groups? So the main advantage of mini batch gradient descent over that SGD or the stochastic gradient descent is that we can get a performance boost when we are having some good kind of hardware, especially when we are using GPUs. The algorithm's progress in this parameter space is less erratic. I mean, it is less random than the SGD with fairly large. I mean, if you set the number of batches an optimum level. So as a result, what happens in this scenario, I'll show you a diagram basically. Where is that? Yeah. So it is a combination of the three types of learning. The red line which indicates is the stochastic gradient descent. The blue line, which is the batch gradient descent, which will look the most smooth, since the batch gradient descent is taking the whole training set at every you might say iteration. The mini batch thing is actually represented using green. So the mini batch is which we are discussing now, and the red thing is the stochastic gradient. See the randomness. Even when it has reached the global minimum, it is again jumping around. and the green thing, which is known as the mini batch. So the result which we actually see is that the mini batch gradient descent will actually end up walking around a bit closer to the minimum than SGD. So the mini batch is actually more accurate than SGD, but on the other hand, it may be harder for it to escape from the local minimum. Now the problems we'll see later on again, but why it is becoming harder and those things we'll look into the code when we are implementing that in the real life models. So in the case of problems that suffer from local minima, like unlike linear regression. Now this figure shows the paths taken by the 3 gradient descent algorithms in the parameter space during the training. So what can we infer from this? They all end up near the minimum, but batch gradient descent path actually stops at the minimum. I mean, batch gradient descent is the most accurate here. And then the stochastic and the mini batch continue to walk around. The stochastic a bit more randomly. However, don't forget that batch gradient descent takes a lot of time to take each step. And SGD and mini batch would also reach the minimum if we use a good learning schedule. I mean, if you stop the model at a good threshold. So this was all for gradient descents, all these things. And lastly, we'll see another comparison of all the algorithms that we have discussed so far for linear regression. This thing. So just look into this. The first one is the normal equation, and the other three, the second, third, and fourth, are the gradient descent. So here in the normal equation, it actually, I mean, if we increase the number of features, it actually goes slow, and no scaling is required. And the library which scikit-learn actually supports for normal equation is this linear regression. For the batch gradient descent thing, it actually takes in the whole data set at every iteration or every instance. And for that reason, it actually goes very slow. But on very large number of features, on very large training sets, basically if the number of features is large, I mean the major parameter is the number of features, which is very large, then batch gradient descent is very fast than the normal equation. And here scaling is required. I mean, in every kind of gradient descent, basically scaling is required, which I showed you earlier. So batch gradient descent, scikit-learn doesn't provide support. You have to do it in naively. For the stochastic gradient descent thing, it is actually not that slow as batch gradient descent, but it is actually faster than that. But stochastic is very random. And lastly, the mini batch gradient descent, which actually takes in small batches from the whole training set. It is fast, it is also accurate, and it is also not that much random, for example, like in what happens in stochastic gradient descent. So from this thing, what can we see is that the most optimized thing here, if we generalize, the most optimized thing which we saw is that this thing, the mini batch gradient descent. So there is almost no difference after training. This is what all happens during the training. All these algorithms end up with very similar models and make predictions in exactly the same way. This is the after training scenario which I'm saying. So these were the things applying which we can actually build a good model. We can actually find out what parameters the model should have for it to make good predictions. And after this, we'll see some, not today, in the next day, we'll see some small things which actually affects through which we can analyze a model. We'll see different types of learning curves. How can we analyze a model? What are the different pitfalls which happens during model training? We'll actually deal with we'll build a small model and we'll try to deploy it in the next, whenever we are meeting. And we'll see what happens during various, say for example, if the model learns too much, say for example, if the model falls short of training instances, so how to handle those things. And we'll build a real life model and we'll deploy it. So this is what we have planned for the next session. For the today's session, if you guys are having any doubt, then you can share here. I'll just stop my sharing. This slide will be actually provided to you via Slack and also uploaded to the dedicated space which was built for this AI, these sessions. So yeah, if anyone is having any doubt, they can just ping in the chat or you may just unmute and say.